Très gentil, merci beaucoup et bon matin tout le monde. My name is Rachel Bendayan. I'm the Associate Minister of Public Safety and the Minister for Official Languages. I'm a proud Canadian, également une fière Québécoise. I've got my elbows up this morning. I'm here to make an announcement on gun control measures that will help save lives and keep Canadians safe. I want to start by thanking all the incredible people that are joining us today, including advocates from Police se souvient, the National Association of Women and the Law, Canadian Doctors for Protection from Guns, the Pan-Canadian Student Movement for Gun Control, the Danforth Families, ainsi que Boufelja de la Grande Mosquée de Québec, le regroupement des maisons pour femmes victimes de violences conjugales, Femmes du Monde et la Fédération des femmes du Québec. Je suis également accompagnée par la GRC et merci d'être ici avec moi aujourd'hui. Il y a certainement de la matière à couvrir dans cette annonce essentiellement qui est divisée en 3 volets. Écoutez, cette annonce est le fruit non seulement de ces 11 dernières semaines depuis ma nomination en tant que ministre, mais également les années de travail en amont pour renforcer le contrôle des armes à feu et lutter contre la violence armée dans nos rues. This is public safety policy, but it is also personal. As a mother, as a lawyer, as an elected official, and now as minister, I have been working alongside the Canadians standing with me here and many, many more for several years now, working to make our communities safer for our kids, working to make the women we know and love feel safer, working to stem the gun violence we see in our cities. We set out on an ambitious path, and it has been a long road. In 2020, our federal government banned what is now over 2,000 models of assault-style firearms. In 2022-23, our government passed legislation to freeze the market for handguns in Canada, banning the sale, transfer, and importation of handguns into the country. Just recently, in December 2024, we went further, banning some of the additional assault-style weapons that remained in the Canadian market. Today, our government is finishing the job, adding a further 179 unique makes and models of assault-style weapons to the list of prohibited firearms here in Canada. This prohibition takes effect immediately. It is our hope, our government's intention, that this be the last discrete listing of assault-style firearms for prohibition. If we finish the job well, we have all the tools necessary to ensure that new models of assault-style weapons will be captured and denied legal entry into the Canadian market. Let's be clear, these are weapons of war, firearms designed specifically to kill as many people as possible in the least amount of time possible. As with previous prohibitions, the weapons we are banning today are semi-automatic firearms with sustained rapid-fire capability. Experts have told us that they exceed safe civilian use. Aujourd'hui, nous allons de l'avant afin de resserrer le contrôle des armes à feu. Aujourd'hui, nous interdisons 179 modèles supplémentaires d'armes à feu de type assaut. Un pas crucial vers une interdiction complète et totale des armes d'assaut au Canada. Ces armes semi-automatiques qui ont été conçues pour le champ de bataille n'ont rien, mais rien à faire dans nos communautés. À partir d'aujourd'hui, ces armes à feu ne peuvent plus être utilisées, vendues ou importées légalement au Canada et ne peuvent être transférées ou transportées que dans des circonstances limitées. Le gouvernement fédéral met en place un décret d'amnistie présentement en vigueur afin de protéger les individus contre toute responsabilité criminelle alors qu'ils prennent les mesures nécessaires pour se conformer à la loi d'ici le 1er mars 2026. I take my responsibilities as minister very seriously. In a world filled with uncertainty, my top priority is keeping Canadians safe. Firearms meant for the battlefield should never see the light of day on our streets. Canadians have seen firsthand the devastating impact of these weapons. Polytechnique, Portapique, Moncton, Dawson, the Quebec City mosque shooting. These tragedies represent dark moments in our country's history. Canadians are also very well aware of the impact of firearms in the United States, where there they experience about 600 mass shootings per year, nearly 2 per day. And those are mass shootings. In 2022, there were over 48,000 firearm-related deaths in the US. Here in Canada, our federal government has taken action to strengthen gun control and tackle gun violence head-on. As a result of the various steps we have taken, we've seen a decline in violent crime involving firearms across Canada. Data for 2023 was just recently released by Statistics Canada and shows that this decline was most pronounced in large urban areas, with a decrease of violent crime involving guns of 19% in Toronto, a decrease of 12% in Montreal, of 15% in Vancouver, and a decline of 22% in Calgary. Although homicides involving firearms had risen year over year previously, in 2023, the rate dropped by 18%. There were, in fact, 54 fewer firearm-related homicides in Canada in 2023. Reducing the number of guns in circulation helps reduce gun violence. Retirer les armes d'assaut de style militaire de nos rues est une tâche d'envergure énorme, énorme. Et il a toujours été notre intention d'offrir une indemnisation juste et équitable pour les entreprises et les propriétaires individuels affectés par l'interdiction grâce à un programme de rachat. Ce programme de compensation est un élément clé de notre plan pour retirer une fois pour toutes les armes d'assaut de nos rues. Le programme est lancé avec des milliers d'armes déjà détruites. J'ai eu l'occasion même d'assister au processus de destruction en personne récemment. Je suis déterminée à bâtir ce progrès alors que nous ouvrons le programme aux individus dans les prochains mois. I am happy to say that the buyback program has been underway since early December and that it is so far extremely successful. As it stands, the first phase of the program covers assault-style firearms that were prohibited in 2020 and that are in the hands of our stores and retailers. As of today, nearly 7,500 firearms have been submitted by businesses across the country for collection and destruction. The large majority of them have already been destroyed. I had the opportunity to personally witness the destruction of some of these firearms, and I want to give a sincere thanks to the men and women of the RCMP for the professionalism with which they do this work. Thank you. I'm also happy to report that the government will be ready later this spring to commence compensating Canadians. Canadian firearm owners that work with the police of jurisdiction across the country. I will leave the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP to respond to questions in that regard. But let me tell you from the political perspective how heartened I am by the interest of so many jurisdictions already. I'm happy to announce today that we have just signed a contribution agreement with the City of Winnipeg to participate in the program fully, and several agreements are on their way for signature. Before I move on, allow me to specify and to reassure Canadian hunters in particular. Even with a successful completion of the buyback program, even with the prohibition we are adding today, there are still over 19,000 unique makes and models of non-restricted firearms available for hunting and sport shooting in Canada. Today, we are taking yet another important step to strengthen gun control. Today, our government is announcing the launch of a comprehensive review of the firearms classification regime. This responds directly to a key recommendation of the Mass Casualty Commission, recommendations from an independent expert advisory panel, recommendations from industry and industry representatives, as well as calls from both gun control advocates and gun owners. We are answering that call. Nous entamons un examen complet de la classification des armes à feu afin de simplifier et moderniser le cadre juridique et combler les lacunes dans notre système. The current firearm classification system originated back in the 1960s. Since then, it has become ever increasingly more complex. In fact, we now have one of the most complex systems of firearm classification in the world. This creates challenges for law enforcement, and we've heard that directly from our policing partners. It also creates challenges for lawful gun owners who deserve certainty. I want to be very clear on this point. The overwhelming majority of gun owners abide by the law. But it's become harder and harder for people who want to do the right thing to follow a classification system that is so complex. In the past, we've seen some firearm models that were designed for military use be later marketed for hunting and civilian use. The SKS, for example, was a firearm designed by the USSR for use in the Second World War. When the war was over, the surplus, of which there was a considerable volume, was dumped at a low price into the Canadian civilian market and marketed for hunting. Tackling complex issues like this one, where Russian firearms designed for one use are then marketed for hunting in Canada. It requires a thoughtful and comprehensive approach to how we classify firearms in this country. En plus de l'examen de la classification, nous travaillons également à déposer, dès que possible, de nouveaux règlements pour mettre en place les mesures nécessaires afin de limiter les chargeurs à haute capacité. Je peux confirmer que nous présenterons de nouveaux règlements dans les prochaines semaines pour aller de l'avant avec les mesures sur les chargeurs à haute capacité. Just before my appointment in December, we tabled draft regulations on the firearms reference table. Following extensive consultations and feedback over the last number of weeks, including feedback from stakeholders, I believe that these regulations should be made stronger. That is why I've instructed my officials to strengthen these rules so that manufacturers and importers have to wait for the completion of a technical assessment and obtain a reference number before new guns enter the Canadian market. Now, let me take you to a final aspect on what I've been working on with women's groups these last many weeks and years. Let me walk you through the concrete step that we are taking today to address the use of firearms in situations of domestic violence and gender-based violence. Advocates, many of them standing behind me today, have been calling on us to act decisively to address this scourge at the root of so much suffering. I can announce today that our federal government is moving forward on implementing additional provisions of C-21 to ensure that individuals who are convicted of an offense during which violence was used, threatened, or attempted against their partner or against any member of their family cannot obtain a firearms license. Any request for a license must be refused. Firearms licenses will also be revoked if authorities have grounds to suspect that an act of domestic violence or stalking are taking place. Désormais, les personnes condamnées pour violence ou menace envers un partenaire ou un membre de leur famille ne pourront pas obtenir de permis de détention d'armes à feu. De plus, si les autorités ont des raisons sérieuses de penser qu'une personne pourrait avoir commis un acte de violence domestique ou de harcèlement, elles seront tenues de révoquer son permis de détention d'armes. Nous implémentons également les mesures dites drapeau jaune pour suspendre temporairement le permis d'armes à feu d'une personne s'il y a des motifs raisonnables de soupçonner que cette personne n'a plus le droit de détenir un permis. Taken together, the measures I am announcing on behalf of the federal government today represent a significant and meaningful step to strengthen gun control in Canada. It is a testament to our government's commitment to tackling gun violence head-on. This is not just policy for me. This is personal for me and for so many women across the country whose lives have been upended by dangerous guns falling into the wrong hands. Women in particular have been asking for the measures being announced today, and they didn't do it just for themselves, but for our children and the next generation. And our government stands with them and is delivering for them. The safety of women, the safety of all Canadians, is a nonpartisan issue. Pierre Poilievre and his Conservative Party have said that they would reverse everything that our government has done to protect Canadians from gun violence, including reversing the important measures we've announced today and over the last many years. I believe that no one is made safer by adding more semi-automatics into our communities, and that is why I am here today. Thank you.
Merci.
I would now...
Merci.
Merci.
Thank you. On va maintenant passer à la période des questions.
Non, j'aurai quelques autres discours, si vous permettez. Julie Maggie will be speaking now from the Canadian Doctors for Protection from Guns, followed by a number of other speeches, and I will then proceed to questions.
Madame la ministre, il est déjà 11h40. Ça a commencé très en retard. Je crois que ça va dans la salle. On pourrait procéder directement à la période des questions. Ici, on est au Théâtre national de la presse, donc c'est nous, évidemment, qui modérons l'événement. Donc, je passerai à la période des questions, s'il vous plaît. D'abord, Jim Bronskill, Canadian Press.
Good morning. You just mentioned that a government of a different stripe, the Conservatives, could undo much of what you're talking about today. Would it have been better for you to implement particularly the buyback for individuals sooner than sometime later this spring?
Thank you, Mr. Bronskill. We began the compensation program, the buyback program, in December. It is having actually success beyond our expectations in the sense that more guns have come in than we initially expected, and we are proceeding with the buyback from Canadian individuals very shortly this spring as planned.
You mentioned the SKS. We were told in the technical briefing it is not among the ones that have been prohibited today. Why is that?
The SKS is an example, as I mentioned in my remarks, of a gun that was initially designed for one purpose and then marketed for another. I think the classification review, which I've announced today, will address that in particular. The SKS, of course, is a gun that, as I mentioned, has been used for hunting in Canada, particularly by Indigenous peoples. And in our discussions with Indigenous communities, it was made clear that they are used for sustenance hunting, which is a right that we must respect.
Christopher Nardi, National Post.
Good morning. Your comments seem to imply that this would be the last of the addition of the prohibitions. Can you confirm this, that as of now it is kind of done, your list is complete, and no more, you don't expect to prohibit any additional weapons of the sort?
Thank you for the question. I wouldn't want to fetter the government's ability to list in the future, and that is why I'm saying it is our intention. But I would like to be clear, we have now gone through an extensive review of the guns that were previously submitted as part of the amendment to C-21, guns considered part of the GAP list of guns. We have a prospective definition moving forward, but what is very important to me, and as I mentioned, the classification review will help finish the work that we have started.
And the classification review, if there are changes to the classification system, presumably will require legislation. There's going to be a federal election at the very least by October, but there's no guarantees that your government will be in place. Are you optimistic that these changes will even occur if there's a government change?
I am optimistic. I think Canadians, if you look at their support for gun control measures have spoken very loudly in favor for furthering the work of gun control in Canada. I am aware that there may be an election coming. I have used every single minute of every single day that I have been entrusted with the responsibility as minister since my appointment to advance the measures that I have announced, which I believe will help keep Canadians safe and move a step forward on banning assault-style weapons, but also on keeping guns off of our streets.
Je ne vois pas d'autres questions dans la salle. On va passer, ensuite, on va d'abord passer pour Zoom rapidement. If you're attending on Zoom and you have a question for the minister, please use the raise hand function at this moment, and I'll hand you over the mic. I don't see any question on Zoom at this time. Chris, do you have another follow-up?
Might as well. You mentioned the buyback details compensation would be available later this spring. What has been the delay? We've talked about this for a long time now. What is preventing you from making that announcement sooner?
I would disagree that there's been a delay. The intention was always to come out this spring with the phase that would involve individual Canadians. But of course I hear you, and I myself have been frustrated that we couldn't move faster on a program which I feel is incredibly important and which I've heard from Canadians is incredibly important. The reality is we want to do it right. There are enormous complexities involved in getting a system set up to be able to compensate Canadians, but also protect their personal information. There have also been, because of the way security is set out in Canada with different police of jurisdiction in different parts of the country, numerous exchanges. And perhaps I could pass the floor over to the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP, Brian Larkin, to complete that answer.
Thank you, Madam Minister. And the RCMP has been working very closely with Public Safety Canada, which is the project lead. Naturally, we have stewardship of the Canadian Firearms Program, and we've been working very closely with all 194 police of jurisdiction on an approach to collect from individuals. There's more than 2.3 million licensed law-abiding gun owners in the country. And so our firearms program has worked really closely with every police of jurisdiction, with provincial policing, with various ministries across the country in partnership with public safety. We work very closely within government with procuring a new case management system and looking at this piece. As the minister alluded, it's we're a large country, a lot of geography to cover, and working through these different processes. We've also looked at, we're trying to limit the impact, obviously, on frontline policing. There are a series of demands on frontline policing across the country, including the RCMP. So we've been looking at alternative models to collect, which limits and actually ensures that frontline policing and general duty policing do the work that their Canadians expect them to do. And so we do intend to roll out mid-June across the country in RCMP jurisdictions, and then we'll work very closely with a variety of police jurisdictions. So ongoing, but I want to emphasize the complexity and the challenge of this, and we've worked with other governments across the world to see how they've done it, and again, it is a priority, but I do want to emphasize that simply the collection piece alone, the destruction piece, is a large, complex initiative that has a significant amount. So we look forward to going live in mid-June of this year. Thank you.
Jim, follow-up?
In that vein, can you tell us more about how the firearms will physically be returned and turned in? There's been a lot of discussion about how that might happen, and I know it's happening for businesses now, but can you tell us about how it would work for individuals? How will individuals physically return their firearms for destruction compensation?
Again, thanks, and I'll speak on behalf of the RCMP and the way that we're rolling out our program. We're clearly working very closely with all police services because it does vary from province to province. But the intent would be the Canadian Firearms Program would communicate with those license owners that are in possession of a firearm that falls under the prohibition and would fall into the Firearms Compensation Program. The case management system would work with that individual to set up an appointment. There would be packaging and safe packaging. We have law-abiding gun owners that do this every single day, that ship and move firearms across our country safely. But the mechanism would be to set up an appointment. They would attend a local RCMP detachment. There would be an intake process. Again, we want to limit frontline police officer use, and so we're looking at alternative staffing models, including public servants and civil service and alternative models. We would actually then, process. We would verify serial number, verify ownership. All of those processes go into an independent case management system that would share that data internally with government to process payment. And then the RCMP detachment would, package. We're looking at a third-party carrier to collect and to destroy. And so, that is our general approach as we set out. And so we're planning that through jurisdiction. We've shared those plans with other police services. Again, won't speak specifically to other agencies, but for example, we're working very closely with the Winnipeg Police Service. As the minister alluded, there is a contribution agreement signed with the City of Winnipeg. Our Manitoba division is working very closely with the City of Winnipeg and the Winnipeg Police Service around joint operations and joint initiatives. In some remote areas, the RCMP does intend to use mobile collection units where it's not geographically possible for people to attend a local detachment, and it may be more financially viable and, quite frankly, efficiently for a mobile collection unit to go collect the gun, process it, and then through a third party destroy that firearm. So again, it's very much a a widespread enterprise of communication, collection, destruction, and then, of course, a mechanism of payment through Government of Canada.
Chris, un dernier follow-up?
Let's do it.
Si vous permettez, il y a plusieurs personnes qui ont préparé des remarques. Est-ce que...
Le but du Théâtre national de la presse, évidemment, c'est de répondre aux questions, étant donné qu'il y a eu un très grand retard et la salle est réservée à midi. On va prendre le temps qui va rester pour les questions sur l'annonce. Je pense que...
I have one more question. How much do you know has the government paid out in compensation for the 7,300 rifles that it has bought back in the first phase to date?
I can get back to you with that specific information. The numbers that we are showing on the screen and in the handout are from Monday, so I will get back to you with updated information.
You've mentioned that you were surprised by the extent to which businesses have participated. Can you give me a bit, what surprised you? Was it the amount of guns that were required to be bought back? Is it the participation by businesses? How many participated? Which portions or part of that surprised you?
About 80% of the total number of firearms that we were expecting to receive from businesses have already been submitted. And so in the short period of time, and particularly given the Christmas holidays, I think that the speed in which retailers have reacted to the government's opening of the compensation program, but also, yes, the number of businesses, I would say as well. I think the buyback program is going extremely well, and I look forward to continuing its rollout.
Ceci met un terme à la conférence de presse. Je vous remercie beaucoup, Madame la ministre, Monsieur,
Merci à vous.
Madame les participants, pour cette grande flexibilité. Bonne journée.